Blessed are you, Yahweh Eloheinu, King of the universe, who has sanctified us by his commandments and commanded us to hear and respond to the call of the shofar. All right. And I don't think there's anybody here right now who hadn't already got your book. As soon as we can make sure that everybody has the textbook for the courses, well, we'll start the Hebrew classes here within about a week after that, okay? So within about 3 weeks, we should be starting in the Hebrew, okay? And we're going to be doing it after the teaching, after we eat in the afternoon. Just let everybody know. The readings today are going to be in Genesis chapter 12, starting in verse 1 through chapter 17 and verse 27. The name of the reading today is Lekha, which actually means to go out. And this is the call, Lekha, means to go out. The half-Torah, and I'm not sure if we're going to get to the half-Torah today or not, but in case we do, it's in Isaiah chapter 40, verse 27 through 41:16. It's a very interesting half-Torah, and I really like to do it, but there's so much, you know, in these other couple of chapters here that and everybody must understand. Genesis, and I've recognized this even more this year since we started back in Genesis, is so foundational to everything else that we believe or understand. And all in the book of Genesis, it sets the foundational truths for everything else that comes up. The Genesis establishes the base, and then Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy build on that. In verse 1 of Genesis 12, Fathers, we come before you this day on your Shabbat. We ask that you'd guide our words, guide our thoughts. Teach us out of your word. Show us wonders from your word, your truth. Help us, Father, that this word becomes the guide for our entire life. This be the only road that we follow, is your Torah. B'Shem Yehoshua. Amen. So in verse 1, now Yahweh had said to Abram. You notice that's in the past tense. It's something that has already done, you know, been done. Get out of your country, from your kindred, from your father's house, to a land that I will show you. Get out of your country. We all know that he came from a place called Ur of the Chaldees. Now, there's a lot of scholarship, a lot of argument about where the city of Ur actually was. About the only thing we know of, the Scripture says it was in Mesopotamia, Chaldee, Babylonia, Shinar, all those different words for the same area of the world. But for one thing we know, it was a land of idol worship and very evil, idolatrous surroundings is what he's saying, get out from. It's exactly the same thing. He brought Abram out and he was going to teach him some things about who he was, right? But you get him out of all the evil influences so you can teach. It's hard to teach somebody the truth if they're surrounded with evil influences. It's hard for somebody to learn the true Torah sitting in a false church, false worship. They keep the other, you know, feeding it all the time, and it keeps washing out. And most people try to look at everything in the Scripture based on what they've been taught by somebody else anyway, instead of just accepting what Scripture itself actually says. When he says get out of your country, he's saying leave your culture. From your kindred, get away from your family. Your father's house. That includes not only the family, but friends, relatives, by marriage, and all these kind of things. So you're talking about leaving your culture, your family, including all your friends and all your relations by marriage and everything else. If somebody today decides that they want to walk in obedience to Torah, what do you have to leave behind? You may not even deliberately try to leave your family or your friends or anything else, but if you start walking in obedience to Torah and they're not, they will leave you. You know, I mean, it's not a matter of you making a decision. If anything, you'd like to share the truth with them, right? But until somebody develops a love for the truth themselves, they really don't care what we have to say. They really don't, you know, it doesn't matter. They're happy, don't mess with them. Get out of your country, from your kindred, from your father's house, to a land that I will show you. the main influence is not necessarily specified here. The call is to follow and obey Yahweh, and I've taught this before, and I know that other people have taught it too. Well, he didn't even know where they were going, you know, when he went out. He just started out following them blindly. However, go back to chapter 11 and look at verse 31. And Terah took his son Abram and his grandson Lot, the son of Haran, and his daughter-in-law Sarai, his son Abram's wife, and they went out with them from Ur the Chaldeans to go to the land of Canaan. Where were they going? To the land of Canaan. They didn't make it, but they were headed there. Abram finished the trip, right? Left the others there, you know, and they came to Haran and they dwelt there, and that's where Abram actually left from, in Haran. But there was instructions given to him and his family before to come out and go to Canaan. So I think they knew where they were going, even though people say they didn't. Scripture makes it sound like they did, to me. Before we go to verse 2, go to Micah chapter 7. Verse 6. He says, for son dishonors father, daughter rises against her mother, daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies are the men of his own house. Isn't that what Messiah also said? He said, I didn't come to bring peace, I came to bring a sword. And he said what? The enemies of a person will be what? Out of his own house. Most people, when you start walking in Torah, you're not really going to be accepted or liked if you stay where you were. You're going to have to go someplace else, or everybody else will go someplace else and leave you alone there. Go to Matthew 10. In Matthew chapter 10, starting in verse 32. Messiah speaking, he said, therefore whoever confesses me before men, him I will also confess before my Father who is in heaven. But whoever denies me before men, him I will also deny before my Father who is in heaven. Everybody knows, and I've said this before, but just in case somebody doesn't know, look up the word deny. In Webster's dictionary, you'll find that the first definition of the word deny is to contradict. So in reality, he says, whoever contradicts me before men, him I will also contradict before the Father. Verse 34, do not think that I came to bring peace on earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. Ephesians calls the what? The Word, the sword of the Spirit, right? Everybody runs around with their Bible in their arm calling it their sword. Messiah came to bring not peace but a sword, the Word of Yahweh. The Word of Yahweh is the flaming sword that guards the way back into the garden. You walk according to that Word provides a path, a safe path back to the garden. You get off of that path, and what you're going to be eat up or burned up by that consuming fire, that sword, which is His Word. Obedience brings blessings. Disobedience brings curses. Verse 35, for I have come to set a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. That word set a man, I've come to alienate a man from, is what it actually says in the Greek. And a man's foes will be those of his own household. He who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me, and he who loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. He's not saying we shouldn't have affection for the members of our family, but he's just saying if you put them above me, it's not worthy of him. You better remember the book of Job. He lost everything. And everybody came against him. His wife even said, curse God and die. But he said, you crazy, I ain't, you know. And he wound up having more at the end than he did in the beginning, didn't he? Because he wouldn't turn away from Yahweh. We have to do the same thing. Yahweh has to be more important to you than anything else. If anything else is important to you, then you love it unto death, right? Verse 38, he who does not take his cross and follow after me is not worthy of me. The word cross is actually staros, or execution stake. You reckon they knew what he was talking about because he hadn't gone to the execution stake yet. So what's he talking about? He's talking about dying to self. The hardest job we all have to learn to do is die to self. We want to be the biggest, we want to be the best, we want to be number one. Verse 39, he who finds his life will lose it, and he who loses his life for my sake will find it. Your life is bound up in him, in Messiah, right? He is the Word, so it's bound up in the Word. You can't separate him from the Word. If you do, you got a different Messiah. Go to Hebrews 11. In Hebrews chapter 11, starting in verse 8, he said, by faith Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to the place which he would receive as an inheritance. And he went out not knowing where he was going. And we just read over there where his father had been called and they were going to go to the land of Canaan. So what is this really saying where he not knowing where he was going? He knew the land that he was going to, right? But he didn't know necessarily what he would find there. He didn't know what it was going to be like, not knowing where he was going. It's not that he didn't know the name of the place he was going into. It's kind of like people, you know, you might move from Texas to Oklahoma. Well, you've never been there before, so you don't know what you're going to find, but you know the place you're going, but you don't know what you're going to find when you get there. And yet doctrines have been made on this about, you know, he didn't know where he was going. Just blindly following something. But we never read where he gave him a map and said, follow this map, and wherever you get to, that's where you get. You know, it's not that type of thing. Go back to Genesis in verse 2, chapter 12. I'm not trying to diminish the fact that Abraham obeyed Yahweh and did what he said to. In verse 2 he says, I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. The word bless there in verse 2, I will bless you, is the number 1288. The word blessing is the number 1293. The number 1288 is the word barak. It actually, in a literal sense, means provide benefits to. I will bless you. I will provide benefits to you, is literally what it's saying to him. And then he says in the word blessing, 1293, you shall be a blessing. The word 1293 actually means a source of blessing or prosperity. He's saying, I'm going to make you the source of blessing and prosperity. And it's through Abraham that everything else came into being, right? As we study these and realize what Yahweh is saying to him, understand the affection that Yahweh has for Abraham, or Abram. Based on what? His obedience to his word. It's as simple and as hard as that. If Yahweh is no respecter of person, He will grant you the same blessing, or becoming a blessing, the same as He did for Abraham. Messiah said, I call you my friend if you obey me. Did we say that? That's what Yahweh called Abram, his friend. In verse 3, He says, I will bless those who bless you. There again, it's the number 1288. And I will curse him who curses you. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. The word blessed there at the end, shall be blessed, is the number 1288. Benefits provided for. Bless and bless in the first part of verse 3 is the same number, 1288. I will curse him who curses you. The first word curse there is the number 779. The second word, I will curse him who curses you, that word is 7043. Big difference between those two words. 779 is the word arar. It means to execrate, to bitterly curse, to invoke evil upon. So what he's saying, I will invoke evil or bitterly curse him who, and that word curses there is the number 7043, kalal. It means to lightly esteem. He's saying, I will bitterly curse those who lightly esteem you. Now you think about that just a little bit, you know. Abraham, you know, has he been lightly esteemed? How about his descendants? Have they been lightly esteemed in the world? If there's ever been any prejudice shown along those lines, then they have brought a bitter curse upon themselves. This is me saying this. Those who continue in the faith or trusting Yahweh's word like Abram did will be blessed like he was. Anyone who continues following the word, doing what the word says do, believing Yahweh, will be blessed like he was. The genealogy of the Messiah is traced back to Abraham, Matthew 1. Do you think that that has any significance? Even if we don't understand the genealogy, the fact that it goes all the way back to Abraham says something. He didn't go to anybody else. In verse 4, so Abram, and if in our English Bibles it's got an A-B, R-A-M, in the Hebrew it's A-V, above. The number is 87. Abram means exalted father or high father. So Abram departed as Yahweh had spoken to him, and Lot went with him. Now Lot was his brother's son. That makes him his nephew, right? The name Lot, the number 3876. The name itself means a covering. Covering. I thought it was kind of interesting. Abram went out and took a covering with him. If I didn't tell you before, Haran, where they were leaving from, is the number 2771. It means parched. Also, it means a mountaineer. Abram departed as Yahweh had spoken to him, and Lot went with him, and Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. 75 years old. In verse 5, then Abram took Sarai, his wife, and that is Sarai, S-A-R-A-I, Sarai, his wife, and Lot, his brother's son, and all their possessions that they had gathered, and the people, or nephesh, or the souls that they had gathered, or whom they had acquired in Haran, and they departed to go to the land of Canaan, so they came to the land of Canaan. That says right there, he left to go to Canaan, so he knew where he was going, as far as the place. The name Sarai, the number 8297. The word itself means princess. It's also nominative, or comes from 8269. Sarai comes from the word sar. Sar, as the Hebrew word, means prince. Sarai is princess. Really, it means a head person or chief or somebody. And the word people that they had acquired is number 5315. It's the word nephesh. Other places it's translated souls. In Hebrew literature, it's been taught that the souls they took with them were proselytes who went to follow Yahweh. That they had learned about Yahweh from Abram, and they went to follow and continue with him. So when they came out, they came with them. Now, I can't verify whether that's true or not. The Scripture doesn't say that. But why else would these people, they're leaving an idolatrous community, going out in the wilderness following something or somebody else, and these people go with them? So in my mind, it seems to substantiate the fact that these were people that had converted or changed over to follow this God, that Abram was following, whoever he was. It says that he took his brother's son, his wife, and all their possessions that they had gathered in that verse. That's the number 7408, possessions gathered. Rachash is the Hebrew word, root word. It means to collect or to lay up property. Anything that they had acquired, in day-to-day, whatever kind of tools or farming tools or, whatever they had acquired to do things with is what it's talking about. Things that they had accumulated. Maybe it's cooking gear, maybe it's furniture, or somebody had a favorite chair. I don't know what these things were, but that's the implication of the Hebrew words, whatever property that they had acquired. The souls are people whom they had acquired. That number acquired is 6213. It's the word asa. It means to do or make. So the souls that they had done or made. It also means to fashion. It also means to act with effect, not affect, but effect, E-F-F-E-C-T. They had, done something with these people, and it brought about an effect in these people. That also makes it sound like these are people that they had talked to that had changed their mind about what they believed in and what they followed and what they searched for. So those that joined with Abram in his calling to come out and go somewhere else. Moshe, the name itself, means to draw out. Moshe was one who drew the people out of Egypt, right? Aren't we called to come out of the world? Everybody would say, yeah, we're called to come out of the world and join with Yahweh, right? The question is then, why don't we leave the world behind and follow him? Why don't we do that? Why is it so hard for people to do that? Why is it so hard for people to understand Yahweh says celebrate the feast? That don't mean go to work. Now, I step it on toes again, and people get angry, but if Yahweh says these are days that you're not supposed to work on, what does it mean? You don't work. Why do people do those things? Is it because they've been taught for so long that, well, we don't have to follow them old laws anymore? Or is that a convenient crutch and I fall back on because after all, if I don't work, then I lose my job? Where is people's faith? Is it in what Yahweh's word says or in this world system that they look to? People have to decide what you want to follow. Okay? People have to decide the end result that I want. Do I get it by going this path or this other path? Do I get it by following Yahweh's word or by following the path of what the world says? That's the choice that you have to make. Nobody can make that for you. You have to decide where you're going to end up as to which way you want to go. So those that join with Abram in his calling to come out with him. We see it throughout Scriptures in different places. Isaiah and other places where he says, come out of her, my people, lest you partake of her sins and all this kind of stuff. Go to the book of James, Yaakov in chapter 5. I know it's in here. There it is. James chapter 5, verses 19 and 20. Verse 19, he said, "Brethren, if anyone among you wanders from the truth, and someone turns him back, let him know that he who turns a sinner from the error of his way will save a soul from death and cover a multitude of sins." Now, there are a lot of people that have taken that to mean, well, if somebody made a sin, you don't go tell nobody because, you're supposed to cover their sins. That's not what that's talking about. What he's saying, that if you turn someone back to the truth is what Yahweh's word says, right? Not what somebody else thinks. Then, turn him back to the truth, that person then becomes a doer of what the word says. He confesses his own sin, and he is forgiven, and that way then this multitude of sins is being covered, right? Through the death, burial, resurrection of the Messiah. That does not mean that if somebody else does something wrong that you're not supposed to go tell the authorities. That's not what that's saying. It's not saying do that, but that's not what this is in reference to, is what I'm trying to get at. The whole point of it is, if you can direct a person back to the truth of the Torah, then Yahweh will what? He's the one that cleanses of sin. Nobody else can. And remember, sin is transgression of the Torah. Go to Galatians 6. In Galatians chapter 6, in verse 1 and 2. "Brethren, if a man is overtaken in any trespass," there again we're talking about trespassing against the Torah of Yahweh, "you who are spiritual, restore such a one in a spirit of gentleness, considering yourself, lest you also be tempted. Bear one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of the Mashiach." So if somebody else is overtaken, you're supposed to try to help that person in a spirit of gentleness, to lead them to the truth. Not to force. Not to slap them upside the head with something make them feel bad. Yeah, as so many people try to do. In a spirit of gentleness. Go back to Genesis. Verse 6. I think this is so neat that he talks about they went to go to the land of Canaan, so they came to Canaan, and in verse 6, Abram passed through the land to the place of Shechem. Shechem is the number 7927. Shechem today is the modern city known as Nablus. Arab city.
That number again?
7927. 7927, city of Nablus. It's about 30 miles north of Jerusalem. It means ridge, or the back or the shoulder, is what this word Shechem means, He said they passed through the land of the place of Shechem as far as the terebinth tree of Moreh. And the Canaanites were then in the land. Isn't that neat? Terebinth tree is the word 436. Elon. Moreh, 4176. The great tree. Now the word Moreh means what?
Teacher.
Teacher. However, the root of it is the number 4175. Moreh, 4176. The root of it is 4175. And it has the additional meaning of an archer, or the one who shoots an arrow or points the finger. To shoot out the finger is to like to shoot an arrow, to shoot out the finger like a teacher would do. To point out, to show. But it also means the early rain. The early rain. And early rain refers to the rains in the fall. The fall. So it's talking about this great tree of the teacher. Maybe Nicodemus understood something. He said, we know that you are a teacher of righteousness. Righteousness being upright, like an upright tree. Anyway, this will all come as we go on. Verse 7. Then Yahweh appeared to Abram and said, to your descendants I will give this land, and there he built an altar to Yahweh who had appeared to him. That word appeared there, you know, if you look it up, it's the number 7200, but the form of it won't exactly be that root word. It's Vayirah. Actually, literally, the Hebrew says, Vayirah Yahweh el Abram. Yahweh appeared to Abram, and was seen Yahweh by Abram. Yahweh was seen by Abram. It's funny here because in other places it'll tell us to, and he then appeared to him in a vision. But here he didn't appear in a vision. He was seen by him. Who did he actually see? Yehoshua. That word ra'ah means to see or to look at, to inspect, to perceive, to consider. All of those meanings are in that one word. To see, to have concern for it, you know, to perceive. But he said that the Canaanites were in the land at that time. Then Yahweh appeared to Abram and said, to your descendants I will give this land, and there he built an altar to Yahweh who had appeared to him, or who was seen by him. Evidently the Canaanites being in the land is just an afterthought. It really didn't make any difference. Yahweh said, I'm giving the land to you. Go over to Genesis 15 just a second. Look at verse 16. Here's where he's talking about to Abram, and he's talking about his descendants, and he said that they're going to be in Egypt. But in the fourth generation they shall return here, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. Amorites are part of these Canaanites, all of these people that were in the land. So there had to be a time frame when everything would be completed. Everybody's waiting for the appointed time right now, and the appointed time is going to be when all the sins of the world are completed to the point where he's ready to do something with them. Okay. In verse 8, and he moved from there to the mountain east of Bethel, and he pitched his tent with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. There he built an altar to Yahweh and called on the name of Yahweh. Word Bethel, or they got Bethel, it's Beit El, means the house of El. The number there is 1008. The house of El. and the term Ai, which is the way it's spelled in most Bibles, Ai or Ai, the here is V-H-I. The number is 5857. The word itself means a heap of ruins. So the house of Yahweh on one side and the heap of ruins on the other side. And that's where he built an altar. That word built in verse 8 is 1129. The word is banah. It's the root of the number 1121, which is the word ben, translated son of. Here he's building an altar, and it's the same root word that's becoming a son of or builder of. It means to build, but it also means to establish a family. When Abram built this altar, he built an altar using what? Stones. Yahweh is building an altar of people, is he not, or sons, so to speak? Go to Genesis 2, in verse 22. So then the rib which Yahweh Elohim had taken from man, he made Banah, or he built into a woman, and he brought her to the man. He built or made this woman, he built Banah, this woman, from the man, okay? He built this altar of stones. It's the same word. The word for stone, if you want to just write yourself a note, is number 68. Stone in the Hebrew is spelled with an aleph, bet, nun. Eben. Aleph, bet, nun. Eben. The word made or build, 1129, is bet, nun, hey. Banah. The root, the ben and the nun, are the same in both of them. Okay, well, they're a prefix or a different suffix, okay? The number that's translated son, or ben, which is 1121, son, as in builder of the family name, is bet, nun, hey. But the Hebrew letters. This place where he built the altar, what did he do? He called on the name of Yahweh. Go to 1 Peter. Y'all may have already seen this, but to me it's kind of an exciting thing, because in 1 Peter in chapter 2, I know we've read this many times. Starting in verse 4. This is one of those areas where most English Bibles, or King James or New King James, has got words in italics and so forth that have been added to try to give you the understanding that the translators had. But if we leave out some of those words and just read the actual words in the text, then it takes on a little bit different understanding or meaning. So in verse 4, mine says, coming to him as to a living stone. As to, take them out. He is a living stone. Coming to him, a living stone. Rejected indeed by men, but chosen by Yahweh. Take out the word and just chosen by Yahweh, precious. He's precious to Yahweh. Then verse 5 said, you also as living stones. See, that's where they add. We're not the true living stone. He is. We are as. We're supposed to be like him. As living stones are being built up a spiritual house, a holy priesthood, to offer up spiritual sacrifices acceptable to Yahweh through Yehoshua the Mashiach, the anointed of Yahweh. Therefore it is also contained in the scripture, behold, I lay in Zion a chief cornerstone, elect, precious, and he who believes on him will by no means be put to shame. He's the cornerstone, the head of the corner, the chief corner, or he's the one that starts, before you build all the house. Verse 7, therefore to you who believe he is precious, but to those who are disobedient, the stone which the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone. Verse 8, and a stone of stumbling and a rock of offense. They stumble, being disobedient to the word to which they also were appointed. This is a letter written by Peter. And he's talking about them being disobedient to what word? The Torah and the prophets, right? It's all he can be talking about. I mean, he didn't have any idea he was writing something that's going to be called Scripture later on. He was just writing a letter to somebody. Those who were scattered abroad. The one came to gather all those scattered people and bring them back as sons to build the family name. Why is it so important to know the name of Yahweh then? Why has organized religion tried to keep the name of Yahweh away from us? Why have they tried to keep the name of the Messiah away from us? If we don't know who he is, if we don't know that Yahweh is deliverer, then we don't have any idea who he is. Do you think it's been an organized deception by the adversary? I'm not trying to say people really knew. They were just, people get caught up in things and become a part of it, whether they realize it or not, just out of ignorance more than anything else, not knowing. But they stumbled, being disobedient to the word to which they also were appointed. You know, if you go through here enough and look up all these different words where it talks about stone and builders and building stones and shaping stones and plummet stone and all the different things, you could probably make a pretty good case that Messiah was a stonemason more so than a carpenter. Okay? But I'm not trying to go into that now, but I'm just saying, get a hold of the understanding of building a stone. They built houses using stones. They didn't build these things like we build today, which are called houses, but it's really just some kind of a skeletal structure, covered with paper. But if you're building a stone or building a house or building a family, all these words are the same. If these words then are the building blocks, okay, of the family, and if these words are the Messiah who came in the flesh, then we, when we become like this word, we are then imitating him. And we are becoming part of that house of Yahweh. Right? And then you can be called by his name. Okay. I got excited about this, in this building this thing, because I don't think very many people ever really look at it. Is understanding that the words are what we're using to build us up into this house, to become this living stone, as living stone. A stone is what the house is built up, as a living stone and part of the living house that he is building. Remember when it talks about Moses was faithful in all his house? But the house that the son builds is what? Greater than the other.
In Revelation he says he will make us pillars in the temple.
Yeah, pillars in the temple. Okay. In verse 8, and he moved from there to the mountain east of Bethel, and he pitched his tent with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east, and there he built an altar to Yahweh and called the name of Yahweh. So Abram journeyed, going on still toward the south. It's funny, toward the south, 5045 is also the Hebrew word Negev. So when we look on the map today and we see the desert and it's got the name Negev on it, that's the Hebrew word for south. He was going to the Negev, the south. Verse 10, now there was a famine in the land, and Abram went down to Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was severe in the land. It came to pass when he was close to entering Egypt that he said to Sarai his wife, indeed I know that you are a woman of beautiful countenance. Now we just got through reading a while ago, Abraham was what, 75? So he was 10 years older than Sarai. How old is she right now then? 65 years old. And yes, we know that she is a beautiful woman, right? 65 years old and beautiful. Okay. Verse 12. Therefore it will happen when the Egyptians see you that they will say, this is his wife, and they will kill me, but they will let you live. Just so you'll know, to kill the husband, to possess the wife, seems to have been a very common practice among the royalty of Egypt. There was an ancient tombstone found, in one of the pyramids and so forth, which shows on that tombstone in the hieroglyphics the priest promising that even after the death of Pharaoh that he would kill all the sheikhs and include their wives in the harem. Okay? So, there's a lot of documentation on stones and everything that backs up this premise, of killing the husband to get the wife. Then verse 13, he said, please say you are my sister, that it may be well with me for your sake, and that I may live because of you. He's trying to find a way to protect his life, right? Was she his sister? Yeah, she was. We'll find it out here if we read on over, you know, well, but she really is. So it really wasn't a lie. It was just a truth that was pointed up for a different reason. Okay. We'll go over Genesis 20. In case I forget it later, I won't, you know, we'll look at it now. Genesis chapter 20 and verse 12. He said, but indeed she is truly my sister. She is the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother, and she became my wife. So in reality, she really was his sister. The daughter of his father. So he didn't tell a lie. It was just that they used that part of the truth, you know, for a different reason. Again in verse 14. So it was when Abram came into Egypt that the Egyptians saw the woman that she was very beautiful. The princes of Pharaoh also saw her and commended her to Pharaoh, and the woman was taken to Pharaoh's house. Remember, the word Pharaoh itself means a great house. He treated Abram well for her sake. He had sheep, oxen, male donkeys, male and female servants, female donkeys and camels. But Yahweh plagued Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. Did I give you the number for Pharaoh? The number 6547. If you want to look it up, it means a great house. It says he treated Abram well. He did good things to and for Abram. But Yahweh plagued Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife, in verse 17. Because of Sarai. You might say that this led to inquiries leading to knowledge of the truth. Why would he do this? Why were these plagues coming? Why were these things coming? This is not something that happened in 30 minutes. It took place over a period of time. Okay? And somebody would begin to say, why are these things happening? There's got to be something going on. What is it? Why is it? Go to 1 Chronicles, chapter 16. This is also a Psalm of David. But I think that there's some insights here into what's going on that we find in this psalm. In verse 8 it says, "Oh, give thanks to Yahweh. Call upon his name. Make known his deeds among the peoples. Sing to him. Sing psalms to him. Talk of all his wondrous works. Glory in his holy name. Let the hearts of those rejoice who seek Yahweh. Seek Yahweh in his strength. Seek his face evermore. Remember his marvelous works which he has done, his wonders and the judgments of his mouth. O seed of Israel, his servant, you sons of Yaakov, his chosen ones." That's what we do, these things we're talking about. We try to share these things with other people. Why do they get so mad at us? You know, they don't like us, all this stuff. Verse 14, "He is Yahweh Eloheka, our El. His judgments are in all the earth. Remember his covenant always. The word which he commanded for 1,000 generations." The covenant is implied, which he made with Abraham and his oath to Yitzhak. The covenant he made with Abraham. Does that just say the covenant he made to Abraham is going on down for 1,000 generations? That means all other generations of the seed of Abraham are heir to that covenant. "And confirmed it to Yaakov for a statute, to Israel for an everlasting covenant, saying, to you I'll give the land of Canaan as the allotment of your inheritance. When you were but few in number, indeed very few, and strangers in it. They went from one nation to another, from one kingdom to another people. He permitted no man to do them wrong. Yes, he reproved kings for their sake, saying, do not touch my anointed ones, and do my prophets no harm." And yet something began to happen over here. Because of Sarai. Verse 17, but Yahweh plagued Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. And Pharaoh called Abram and said, what is this you have done to me? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say she is my sister? I might have taken her as my wife. Now therefore, here is your wife, take her and go your way. So Pharaoh commanded his men concerning him, and they sent him away with his wife and all that he had. You see, if he had thought that was her husband, he'd just kill her. Or kill him and take her. But he's trying to save his life. This is what he told her in the first place. But then when all these plagues began to come on Pharaoh and his house, he began to figure out it had something to do with his wife. We'll see it again in a little greater detail. He tells us the same story in another way, in a little bit later. But notice there in verse 18, why did you say she is my sister? I might have taken her as my wife. Here is a king of Egypt, Pharaoh, who is indignant because he didn't tell him that it was his real wife. And yet this is the same man that probably would have killed him if he thought they were married. Who had a right to be indignant? It wasn't exactly Pharaoh having a right to, was it? We don't think in those terms. I mean, our society, we're so sophisticated. We don't think in those kind of terms anymore, okay? Go to Proverbs chapter 21. Proverbs chapter 21, in verse 1. The king's heart is in the hand of Yahweh. Like or the rivers or the channels of water, he turns it wherever he wishes. Is that like saying that Yahweh controls the leaders? It's kind of like if we have a president who we think is a bad president, maybe that's all this country deserved. I mean, if Yahweh controls who's in power and who's not, then who's in control? He is. How come the world keeps trying to think they can control things? Okay, going back, we're going to get into chapter 13. Boy, y'all, we went through a quick chapter then, didn't we? Chapter 13. Then Abram went up from Egypt, he and his wife and all that he had, and Lot with him to the south. It's funny, they were coming down before and they went to the south, and now they're going up to the south. Still going back and forth through the Negev. Abram was very rich in livestock, in silver, and in gold. He was very rich. And he went on his journey from the south as far as Bethel to the place where his tent had been at the beginning between Bethel and Ai, to the place of the altar which he had made there at first, and there Abram called on the name of Yahweh. Lot also, who went with Abram, had flocks and herds and tents. Now the land was not able to support them that they might dwell together, for their possession was so great that they could not dwell there, or dwell together. And there was strife between the herdsmen of Abram's livestock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock. The Canaanites and the Perizzites then dwelt in the land. All these other nations of people living there with all their flocks and animals and so forth, and how these two come up, and they're very rich in all this livestock, and there's probably not enough feed for all of them. Something's got to give. And it's strange here that Yahweh told Abram, he said, you come out to a place that I'm going to show you. They came through Canaan, went on down to Egypt, now they're coming back out of Egypt, back up to Canaan. And Yahweh's already told Abram, I'm going to give you all this land. He could have told Lot, you go somewhere else, this is mine. But what does he do here? He lets Yahweh exercise authority. A lot of people who have authority, but do you exercise it, or do you let Yahweh exercise the authority? If He does it, it's a whole lot different than if you try to do it. If you try to exercise that authority, then it becomes what? A controlling power that people are involved in. A lot of people get caught up in that stuff. They got to control everything and everybody. It's a power struggle. My congregation. You owe me tithes. You owe me whatever. People try to, get into this kind of stuff. It's got nothing to do with what the truth really is. All you are, if you're a minister before Yahweh, and you're ministering to His people the way He wants it done, right? That's what it's all about. Verse 8, so Abram said to Lot, please let there be no strife between you and me, and between my herdsmen and your herdsmen, for we are brethren. Is not the whole land before you? Please separate from me. If you take the left, then I'll go to the right. Or if you go to the right, then I will go to the left. There's an awful lot of people out there teaching Lot chose one thing because he was walking by sight, not by faith. All he could see was the land well watered and everything. He thought, oh, really so great, Have y'all heard these stories about him choosing to go down there because, of his walking by sight, not by faith? And in reality, all Abram did was let him make the choice, and who made the choice for him? Yahweh did, because He'd already told him, I'm giving you this land, and he can choose to make it. Abraham is relying on what Yahweh is saying to do something, not what he wants to do, or not trying to control. You see the difference? We must let Yahweh be who He is. Okay. Before we go on to verse 10, go to 1 Corinthians 6. The more we study, the more we learn. Two things happen. One, people become more convicted about what Yahweh's Word says, and we turn more to Him for our control, or we begin to try to do it ourselves. And we begin to lose faith in Him doing for us. In 1 Corinthians chapter 6, starting in verse 1, he said, dare any of you, having a matter against another, go to law before the unrighteous and not before the saints? If you have something against somebody else, you'll take it before who? What does this say? Before the unrighteous and not before the saints? Is that like taking it to man's courts, or letting man decide, or letting man's way decide what you want, instead of deciding it between two brothers according to what Yahweh said? Is this saying you're supposed to leave it up to Yahweh to let Him solve the problem? Verse 2, do you not know that the saints will judge the world? And if the world will be judged by you, are you unworthy to judge the smallest matters? If we haven't learned that we're going to be called upon to judge the whole world, and yet instead of us going before Yahweh and letting Yahweh solve the problems that we have, we take it before the people of the world to let them solve the problem that we're supposed to be trying to solve according to what His Word says. Right? Why do we not go to Yahweh's Word? Or is it because we're afraid that we're not going to get what we think we want, so we try to go through some other way, hoping that we can get what we want through man's courts? Is that's what it amounts to? Boy, it's a tough situation, isn't it? Verse 3, do you not know that we shall judge angels, or the messengers? We're going to judge the ones who brought the message from Yahweh in the first place. What are we going to judge them by? Our experience, or what Yahweh's Word says? If we've never learned to go by what Yahweh's Word says, how are we going to learn to judge according to His Word? If we don't follow His Word in our own life, how do we use it to judge somebody else? We haven't learned. Verse 4, if then you have judgments or courts concerning things pertaining to this life, do you appoint those who are least esteemed by the ecclesia to judge? Has anybody ever noticed so many things? Politics are real big in the news right now, right? Because we got elections and all this kind of stuff coming up. Have you ever noticed that a lot of times what one politician says about another is some kind of corruption or criminal charge or this or that? Nothing was ever said about it up until election day.
Right.
And if it's really true, how come somebody didn't bring charges somewhere? What's true? What is truth? And if the truth be known, how many of them really following Torah anyway? And if you try to bring that up to them, what are they going to do to you? Get out of my face. You know, they don't want to hear you. 99% of the world leadership position are filled by who? People with what kind of degrees? Lawyers. I'm not saying I'm against lawyers. What I'm trying to say is I have a whole lot more respect for lawyers that maintain their position as a lawyer and what they were trained for than lawyers who try to go into politics and then distort everything to get what they want. Big difference in those areas. Verse 5, he says, I say this to your shame. Is it so that there is not a wise man among you, not even one who will be able to judge between his brethren? He's asking the question, is there not one among you who's going to be able to judge between his brethren? When Moshe set up to judge the people, what did he judge by? Yahweh's word, according to what Torah said. In Matthew 23, Messiah said, the scribes and the Pharisees now sit in Moses' seat. They're the ones who's supposed to be making these decisions, right? And he said, therefore, whatever they tell you, based on Torah, that's what you're supposed to do. Today, then, if we have problems one for another, are we supposed to operate according to the same word that Torah says and activate our life based on what the Torah says, or go out here to some man's court and let them tell you what you're supposed to do? I'm asking questions. I'm trying to, Verse 6, but brother goes to law against brother, and that before unbelievers. Therefore, it's already an utter failure for you that you go to law against one another. That's a failure right there by itself without anything else being considered. Isn't that what he said? Why do you not rather accept wrong? Why do you not rather let yourself be defrauded? No, you yourself do wrong and defraud, and you do these things to your brethren. Do you not know that the unrighteous will not inherit the kingdom of Yahweh? Do not be deceived. Neither fornicators, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor homosexuals, nor sodomites, nor thieves, nor covetous, nor drunkards, nor revilers, nor extortioners will inherit the kingdom of Yahweh. Boy, that's some pretty strong language, isn't it? And such were some of you. He includes all of this stuff he's saying here as things that happen between brothers. But you were sanctified. You were set apart. You were justified in the name of Yahweh, Yehoshua, and by the Spirit, the breath, the word of our Creator. If we are truly set apart according to His word, then why don't we instruct everything in our life by His word? You can't use His word when it's convenient and then go use something else when it's convenient the other way. Consistency is one of the things that's involved with being obedient to Torah. You can't walk in Torah today and not tomorrow and then change back and forth to suit whatever your whims are.
Can't be wishy-washy.
That's being wishy-washy, isn't it? Not settled. Okay, go back to Genesis. Verse 9, he said, is not the whole land before you? Please separate from me. If you take the left, then I go to the right. If you go to the right, then I will go to the left. There's not supposed to be contention among the family. That's what he was saying, Let there be no strife. That's what he said in verse 8. Let there be no strife between brethren. If strife begins to occur, something's wrong. He could have said, this belongs to me and my descendants, so you go somewhere else. Because that's what Yahweh told him, wasn't it? But he didn't do that. He said to Lot, you choose.
He was thinking more on Lot than he was on himself.
Yeah. Verse 10, and Lot lifted his eyes and saw all the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere. Notice the parentheses, before Yahweh destroyed Sodom and Amorah. Like the garden of Yahweh, like the land of Egypt as you go toward Zoar. A lot of that area of that one time was like a garden. Then it became like a desert. The word, we've got Sodom. The word itself is like S apostrophe Adam. Sodom. It is a real Sodom. 5467 is the word number, and it means a burning. Gomorrah 6017. Literally in the Hebrew it is the word Amorah. I don't know where they come up with this Gomorrah. It kind of change all kinds of stuff. Sodom and Amorah. And the word Amorah actually means submersion, but it can also mean a ruined heap. Actually, you might say that the name that was on the places applied to what became them. We go back and we look at all the stories of Lot, and we see a lot of things in our law books today that's based on what these people did or assumed that they did, and then we have laws applying to these different kind of things that you put on them, what they, and yet all of it has to do with a sexual connotation or sexual sin of some type. And yet the word itself, Sodom, means a burning. So does the word Holocaust, to go up in smoke. Verse 11, then Lot chose for himself all the plain of Jordan, the Yarden, and Lot journeyed east, and they separated from each other. Remember the Jordan River, what the Jordan is, Yarden, and it means a descender. So in a lot of ways, if you stop and think, Lot had some idea of who that was, and he chose the land by the descender. Not too bad, is it? That he was a covering. And it also says he was the only righteous one down there. And he became a judge in one of those cities. And when Yahweh went down to destroy it, who's the only one he took out? I mean, how many people want to have, how many stories about somebody, about why they did something, following their eyes instead of faith or trust or something like that. And yet what Yahweh says about those people is entirely different from what somebody else says about them. Why do they not believe what the Word says? You reckon it's because they don't read it? Maybe they don't know what it says. Verse 12, Abram dwelt in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelt in the cities of the plain, and pitched his tent even as far as Sodom. But the men of Sodom were exceedingly wicked and sinful against Yahweh. Go to Mark chapter 6. John Mark. Doesn't say that in the Bible, does it? Or maybe it does. Mark chapter 6, starting in verse 7. I thought it was interesting. He called the 12 to him, as implied Yehoshua speaking, and began to send them out 2 by 2, and gave them power over unclean spirits. He commanded them to take nothing for the journey except a staff, no bag, no bread, no copper in their money belts, but to wear sandals, and not to put on 2 tunics. Also he said to them, in whatever place you enter a house, stay there till you depart from that place. Verse 11. And whoever will not receive you, nor hear you, when you depart from there, shake off the dust under your feet as a testimony or a witness against them. Assuredly I say to you, it will be more tolerable for Sodom and Amorah in the day of judgment than for that city. He's saying that it's going to be more tolerable for those people, Sodom and Amorah, than for somebody today who just won't even receive the truth of the word of Yahweh. Isn't that what he's saying? Have we ever thought about it like that? when people reject the truth of the word out of your mouth, they don't really realize what they're doing. I'm not sure that we've ever really realized what position we're putting those people in when we go to present it to them. Maybe we need to be praying about what we say and how we say it before we say it. Make sure that we're in the, walking in Yahweh's way. And I'm not saying don't go try to witness to people. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying we need to be in prayer about it. We need to be trying doing it His way, not our way. There's a big difference in those two. Sometimes they don't reject the truth of the word. They just reject you because of what you did or how you did it. We may not ever know. Go back to Genesis, verse 14. And Yahweh said to Abram, after Lot had separated from him, lift your eyes now and look from the place where you are, northward, southward, eastward, and westward, for all the land which you see I give to you and your seed, translated descendants, forever. They're trying to give all that land away right now, aren't they? And I will make your descendants as the dust of the earth, so that if a man could number the dust of the earth, then your descendants also could be numbered. The promise of the land is to all the descendants of Abram. The word seed here is in the plural. It's not seed as referring to Messiah, Mashiach only. The word seed here is in the plural, referring to all the descendants of Adam. As the dust of the earth. Let me ask you a question, and most women know this real well. As the dust is scattered all over everything in the world, is there anything that don't get dust on it? He's saying, as the dust of the earth, I'm going to make your seed. There's a lot of them out there. Most of them probably don't have any idea who they are, or where they come from, or why they're there. Maybe sometimes an opening question somebody would be, have you ever thought about being a descendant of Abraham? If they start giving the spiritual things, say, well, yeah, let's talk about physical for a minute, just to see what happens. You can't never tell. As the dust of the earth is scattered over the world, so shall his descendants be, as many and as scattered. Then your descendants also could be numbered, he said in verse 16. Go to Galatians chapter 3. Verse 16 here in Galatians says, now to Abraham and his seed were the promises made. He does not say, and to seeds as of many, but as of one, and to your seed, who is the Mashiach. Now, what is he trying to tell us here in this writing of Galatians? Because we just, over in the Hebrew, and the word seed is plural, not just singular, but he's saying to seed, not many. But he's referring it to being seed singular. What is he talking about? Is he talking about that all the promises are made then to the seed, who is Yehoshua, who is the true seed of Abraham, and if we are in him, then all of us partake of what Yehoshua gets? That be it? Because Yehoshua had to receive it first before he could give it to us. He was heir of everything. Okay? All belongs to him. So then in him, the singular, then all the seed of Abraham. Now go look at 3:29, verse 29 there. And if you belong from Mashiach, who is the seed singular, then you are Abraham's seed and heirs, plural, according to the promise. Now we're going to have to figure out what belongs to us if we are really that seed. And we'll get to that here in just a minute. Go back to Genesis in verse 17. He's still speaking to Abram. He says, arise, walk in the land through its length and its width, for I give it to you. That didn't mean he didn't have something to do to go get it, did he? Then I removed his tent and went and dwelt by the terebinth trees of Mamre, which are in Hebron, and built an altar there to Yahweh. The terebinth trees of Mamre. The terebinth trees of, that phrase is the number 436. It is the word Elon, which means in. Mamre is the number 4471, or Mamre. It means strength or fatness. So he dwelt by or in the fatness which are in Hebron. It's not Hebron, it's Hebron. Number 2275, and the name of itself means the seat of association. S-E-A-T, the seat of association. So I removed his tent and went and dwelt by or in the trees of Mamre, or the fatness, which are in the seat of association, and built an altar there to Yahweh. I wonder what he built this altar out of. He built it out of stones, shaped according to what Yahweh did. He just picked up stone, laid on the ground, and built an altar. You don't shape it. If you shape the stones with a tool, then you're making the altar look like what you think it ought to be. The altar is a picture of Messiah, is it not? So the altar's got to be built the way you find the stones on the ground, the way Yahweh made the stones. So that the altar then, that really where all the sin is done away with, is built of stones made by Yahweh. That's why he is the true living stone. And we're supposed to become into that image, so we must be shaped by him. We can't be shaped by anything or anybody else, because if we do, then we're not going to be in the image of the Messiah. In chapter 14, it came to pass in the days of Amraphel, the king of Shinar, Arioch, the king of Elasar, Kedorlaomer, the king of Elam, and Tidal, king of nations, that they made war with Bera, the king of Sodom, Bereshith, the king of Amorah, Shinab, the king of Admah, Shemeber, the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zoar. All these joined together in the valley of Siddim, that is the Salt Sea. 12 years they served Kedorlaomer, and in the 13th year they rebelled. In the 14th year, Kedorlaomer and the kings that were with him came and attacked the Rephaim and Ashtaroth, Karnaim, the Zuzim, and Ham, the Amim, and Shaveh, Kiriathaim, and the Horites in their mountain of Seir as far as El Paran, which is by the wilderness. Well, we'll stop right there for a minute. Go back and look at what some of these words and names mean. Kind of interesting, I think. Amraphel, in verse 1, is the number 569. From everything that I've been able to find, I can't get a definitive meaning of what this name means itself, but everything I've looked at history-wise points to this being one that was called Hammurabi. You remember the stories that talk about King Hammurabi of these lands and these people? That was probably who this is referring to. And he was king of Babylon, or Shinar. He was king from 1945 to 1902 BCE, almost 2,000 years before Messiah. He was the one that codified the Babylonian laws. His name means the sayer of darkness. Jusinius, in his Hebrew lexicons, before you get up into some of these others, says that the name means the fall of the sayer. Kind of an interesting thought. Everybody heard of the stone of Hammurabi, that had all these code of laws. And there's so many people out there that like to say that Moses copied his from Hammurabi, without ever thinking about all this stuff that came from these other kings. Probably came from a distortion of what was passed down from Adam. I mean, which came first, right? In verse 1 there, the name Arioch, number 746. He was the king of Elasar. Arioch means a lion-like man. He was a Babylonian leader. Arioch also was a title given to a king named Tyrus, T-H-Y-R-A-S. When you go back and begin to look in the history of everything, you find the term Belus. If you look it up on doing an internet search, the term Belus, B-E-L-U-S, the term Bel, B-E-L, and Baal, B-A-A-L, were all names of deity, but then they begin to be assumed by men as titles. Okay? Arioch, or the mighty lion, was also called Baal. He was also called Ares, A-R-E-S. He was also called Mars, M-A-R-S, and he was also called Belus Martius. He was known as the great god of war. He became, through imaginations and legends, a deity worshipped by the Assyrians, the Greeks, and the Romans. Something starts out as a real person and the name gets applied to it, and they take some kind of a god's name and stick on him, and then legends and stories build and abound and everything, and all of a sudden you wind up with Mount Olympus and all the gods in the Pandora's box and all these kind of things. We wonder where these things came from. This King Elasar is a name for Nineveh and all the area that surrounded it. The city of Mosul was built on the ruins of Nineveh and is still called today El Ashur, or the declension of God. The word declension means going to a lesser degree of excellence or perfection. So that was what God descended down into in this Nineveh. Remember, that was one that he sent, Jonah to go prophesy, and he didn't want to go. Back in verse 1 at Kedar-Laomer. Kedar-Laomer. Numbers 35:40. Kedar-Laomer is the way it will actually be pronounced. The name itself means a handful of sheaves. We've heard we count the Omer, right? The Omer, counting the sheaves. This Kedar-Laomer is a handful of sheaves is what his name means. He was king of Elam, Melech Elam, 5867. Elam is a form of the Hebrew word olam, meaning eternity or extremely far away. So he was called what? The king of eternity. What I'm trying to get us to see is that these people applied stories and everything to these kings and leaders who were supposed to be these great men, Today we have all these stories going around talking about people that were giants in the land, and then they were descendants of angels and women and all this kind of stuff. What we're really talking about are people who were actually nothing more than men, ferocious, tyrants, bullies, lumberjacks, who had names applied to them, and they took names from gods upon themselves, and then the legends and the stories got built until these things become something much greater than what they are, and these legends and stories are still being passed on today by false teachers as being truth. Strange thought, isn't it? Now, I'm not saying that people are doing it, just because they want to deceive people. But then people like to hear things which tickle the ears. People like to hear things which make them feel good. How many people really want to go out and say, I want some truth, even if it hurts? Okay. The next one here, this title, King of Nations, title is the number 8413. It's got three different meanings that can be applied here. It means great son, or fear or reverence, or the object of fear. That's a heck of a thing to be put on a man, be known as the object of fear, and he was a king of nations. And the word nations there is a 1471, it's the word goyim. You know what makes up a goyim? A bunch of goy. And this term goyim here is referring to the mixed populations of Syria and the northern regions of the Euphrates River. All up in that area is where this was. Now in verse 2, well, I'm going to go through a whole lot here, but Bera, the king of Sodom, Bera is number 1298. Bera means the son of evil. Bereshith is the number 1306. His name means with iniquity. Shinav, numbers 8134. It means the splendor of the Father. Shemiber, numbers 8038. It means a lofty flight. L-O-F-T-Y, lofty flight. Talk about all these different, these are all these kings that are fighting against one another. 5 against 4. In the 14th year, Chedorlaomer, in verse 5, came with him and attacked the Rephaim. The word Rephaim is 7497. The word Rephaim is a plural of the Hebrew word Rapha. And you see in a lot of different ministries today based on this healing word, healing ministries, or healing word means to cure, to heal. But these people were also called giants, and they were an ancient race of people called giants. The word Zuzim, there in verse 5, is the number 2104. The word itself means roving creatures. These were the Zuzim in Ham. The word Emim is the number 368. The Hebrew word itself means terrors, T-E-R-R-O-R-S. The Emim, verse 6 says, and the Horites in their mountain of Seir. And the word Horites is the number 2752. The name, the word itself means cave dwellers. This word Horite, these cave dwellers, changed over into the Greek, becomes the word troglodyte. Have anybody ever heard fables and stories about the troglodytes? And then we get trolls and all kinds of stuff, you know. Isn't it amazing where all this stuff comes from? And all the stories, you know. Verse 7, then they turned back and came to En Mishpat, that is Kadesh, and attacked all the country of the Amalekites and also the Amorites who dwelt in Hazazon Tamar. En Mishpat, there in verse 7, the number 5880, it means the fountain or spring of judgment. I think it's amazing that one of the first things happens here is these kings get to fight against these other kings. And Abraham gets drawn into it because his nephew is living in one of these cities. Verse 8. Did I give you the number for Amalekites? 6003. It means a dweller in a valley. And the Amorites, it's 5, 6, 7. It means a sayer. S-A-Y-E-R, a sayer. Verse 8, and the king of Sodom, the king of Amorah, the king of Adbah, the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zoar, went out and joined together in battle in the valley of Siddim against Kedorlaomer, the king of Elam, Tidal, king of nations, Amraphel, the king of Shinar, and Arioch, king of Elasar, 4 kings against 5. Now the valley of Siddim was full of asphalt pits, and the kings of Sodom and Amorah fled. Some fell there, and the remainder fled to the mountains. These asphalt pits that they're talking about here, these pits that are on above ground, these are these same things that modern people tell us today came from fossil fuels, which were the dead bodies of animals, that died underground, billions of years ago. Yet these were asphalt pits out there on the ground. Verse 11, then they took all the goods of Sodom and Amorah and all their provisions and went their way. They also took Lot, Abram's brother's son, who dwelt in Sodom, and his goods, and departed. Then one who had escaped came and told Abram the Hebrew, for he dwelt by the terebinth trees of Mamre, the Amorite, brother of Eshcol and brother of Anar, and they were allies with Abram. Word Hebrew there is the number 5680. It is the word ha-ivri, meaning the one from beyond. Go to Joshua chapter 24. Or Yehoshua. Sounds a whole lot better to say Yehoshua rather than Joshua. Yehoshua chapter 24 and verse 3. Actually, let's start in verse 1, read down to verse 3. It said, then Yehoshua gathered all the tribes of Israel to Shechem, and called for the elders of Israel, for their heads, for their judges, for their officers, and they presented themselves before Yahweh. Yehoshua said to all the people, thus says Yahweh, Elohi of Israel, your fathers, Terah, the father of Abraham, the father of Nahor, dwelt on the other side of the river in old times, and they served other gods. Then I took your father Abram from the other side of the river, led him throughout all the land of Canaan, and multiplied his descendants, and gave him Yitzhak. He was one from beyond. He crossed over. This is where he's telling us that he took him, one from the other place, and he came over. The question is, have we come from the other place and crossed over? And if we have come out of the world of corruption and sin, which is what Abram did, and we have crossed over through the Jordan, the Yarden, the descendant through Messiah Yehoshua, we are now what? Trying to come in the promised land. Then you're not supposed to live like you're part of where you come from. You're supposed to live like you're part of the word that you have been brought into. Abram was looking for a city not made with hands, right? Made by who? The word of Yahweh. That's where we're supposed to be trying to look to live. Okay. Go back and again, it's still talking about verse 13 here. Also, there is what is known as the Tel Armana tablets. Have y'all heard of those? Tel Armana? T-E-L-A-M-A-R-N-A. Look them up on the internet. You can find some really good information. These tablets were found in Middle Egypt. In these tablets, it is written that the people known as the Habiri. Abram was known as the Ha-Ivri. Habiri is referring to the same people. These people known as the Habiri made war on the Canaanite towns and people. So in these Tel Armana tablets is a story of these people making war against these Canaanite towns and people. These Tel Armana tablets of stone were found in 1887. That's how far back these things go. It's another verification of what the Bible says is true. In verse 14 it said, Now when Abram heard that his brother was taken captive, he armed his 318 trained servants, as implied, who were born in his own house, and went in pursuit as far as Dan. He divided his forces against them by night, and he and his servants attacked them and pursued them as far as Hobah, which is north of Damascus, or to the left of Damascus. The word Hobah, 23:27, means a hiding place. So he brought back all the goods. Also brought back his brother Lot and his goods, as well as the women and the people, and the king of Sodom went out to meet him at the valley of Shaveh. That is the king's valley, after his return from the defeat of Kedorlaomer and the kings who were with him. The king of Sodom went to meet Abram. If you go back and look who was the king of Sodom, Bera, king of Sodom, and the word Bera means what? Son of evil. So the son of evil went to meet Abram. I'm trying to paint a picture here and what these names mean if we see it. The king of Sodom, the son of evil, went to meet Abram. Where? In the king's valley. I believe that this particular valley at that time belonged to the king of Salem. Yaru and Salem were two towns before they became joined into one and began known as Jerusalem, but they were two separate towns. He was on the way back, Abram was on the way back to Hebron from this battle of recapturing Lot and everything, right? And the son of evil went out to meet him. Verse 18. Then Melchizedek, the king of Salem. Melchizedek. Melchi meaning king, Zedek meaning what? Righteousness. Melchizedek, the king of Salem, went out, brought out bread and wine. He was the priest of El Elyon. El is 410, Elyon is 5945. El Elyon is El, the most high El. Verse 19, and he blessed him and said, Blessed be Abram of El Elyon, possessor of heaven and earth. Verse 20, and blessed be El Elyon, who has delivered your enemies into your hand. And he gave him a tithe of all. Abram gave Melchizedek a tenth of all. Isn't that what it said? They didn't have no law of tithe or tenth back then, did they? Or did they? He understood Yahweh. He understood he gave a tenth of everything, right? But notice this is really funny because the son of evil, this king, had gone out to meet him, and Melchizedek was there also, and he brought bread and wine. I wonder what bread and wine represents. This couldn't possibly have any kind of symbolic meaning, could it? Couldn't have any. The bread and wine coming from the king of peace, Melchizedek of Salem, king of righteousness, who's also king of peace, Salem's peace. Verse 21, now the king of Sodom, what's his name? Bera, the son of evil, said to Abram, give me the persons and take the goods for yourself. But Abram said to the king of Sodom, I have lifted my hand to Yahweh El Elyon, the possessor of heaven and earth, that I will take nothing from a thread to a sandal strap, and that I will not take anything that is yours, lest you should say, I have made Abram rich. Who did Abram want all his blessings to come from? Yahweh. And he refused to take anything from the son of evil. Did that have any bearing on anything today? Does that give you an idea of where we ought to be committed to, or who? Verse 24, he accept only what the young men had eaten, and the portion of the men who went with me, Anur, Eshcol, and Mamre, let them take their portion. He said, those are followers of yours anyway, let them take that, but he's not. That's what he's saying, right? That's who they were. They were allies with him, isn't that what we read? Y'all ever get into that deep before we're in these passages of Scripture, what these things are saying? Don't you think there's a pretty prophetic significance there that Abram said, I'll take what Yahweh gives me, but I'm not taking what you offer? Where are we in our daily walk? Are we taking what Yahweh wants us to have, or are we taking what the world offers us, thinking that we're going to get rich, you know? That in verse 18, Melchizedek, 2 words, 4442. The king of Shalem, 8004, which means peace. He was the priest, or the Kohen of El Elyon, priest of the Most High. Now, if we study and read all the things that it talks about, we'll find in Hebrews it says he was without genealogy. There was no listing of his father or mother or any of this kind of stuff. And a lot of people begin to say, well, this Melchizedek, that was probably Yehoshua, who appeared as Melchizedek, but yet we have a genealogy of the Messiah. Now, this says he had no genealogy. It didn't give any. Okay? So since he didn't have any, then this is definitely not him. But it was in there for a picture. The whole thing was a symbol of what Abram met. He had two choices. King of Peace came out, the king of Sodom. Both, one offered him bread and wine. And what did he give to him? He gave him a tithe of everything that he'd gotten, right? A tenth of everything he got. The other one offered him what? All the booty and all this kind. He said, no, I don't want nothing from you. But he took the bread and the wine and gave a tithe back. I'm just saying that there are some pictures in here that we really need to take under, and understand. Abram did not fall into the trap set by the son of evil, but accepted the blessing of Yahweh through his high priest. Who is our high priest according to the book of Hebrews? Messiah Yehoshua. So we accept the blessing of our high priest and not fall in the trap set for us by the son of evil. That's all it's about. We want what Yahweh says rather than what the world says. Go to Psalm 110. I couldn't decide which one of these verses in this psalm was the best, so we just read the whole thing, 1 through 7. We were just reading about Abram and coming in contact with Melchizedek, the king of Salem, right? With that in mind, let's read this psalm. A psalm of David, Psalm 110. Yahweh said to my Adonai, sit at my right hand till I make your enemies your footstool. Yahweh shall send the rod of your strength out of Zion, rule in the midst of your enemies. Your people be volunteers in the day of your power, in the beauties of holiness from the womb of the morning. You have the dew of your youth. Yahweh has sworn and will not relent. You are a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek. Yahweh is at your right hand. He shall execute kings in the day of his wrath. He shall judge among the nations. He shall fill with dead bodies. He shall execute the heads of many countries. He shall drink of the brook by the wayside. Therefore he shall lift up the head. I think David understood who this Melchizedek was supposed to be. Who the one who was coming was supposed to be. I think he understood from the story of Abram. And what he accepted from Melchizedek, or Melchizedek. instead of the son of evil. Go to Hebrews chapter 7. I want to get down to verse 28, but we're going to start in verse 1. For this Melchizedek, king of Salem or Shalem, priest of the Most High El, who met Abraham returning from the slaughter of the kings and blessed him. Now it says he met Abraham, but when he met him, his name was still Abram. Returning from the slaughter of the kings and blessed him, to whom also Abraham gave a tenth part of all, first being translated king of righteousness, and then also king of Salem, meaning king of peace. Without father, without mother, without genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but made like the son of El, remains a priest continually. Now consider how great this man was. The writer of Hebrews is telling us to consider how great this man was, talking about this Melchizedek, to whom even the patriarch Abraham gave a tenth of the spoils or the plunder. And indeed, those who are of the sons of Levi, who received the priesthood, have a commandment to receive tithes from the people according to the Torah, that is, from their brethren, though they have come from the loins of Abraham. But he, whose genealogy is not derived from them, received tithes from Abraham and blessed him who had the promises. Now, beyond all contradiction, the lesser is blessed by the better. Think about that. Here, mortal men receive tithes, but there, he, of whom it is witnessed that he lives. You talking about who now? Talking about a picture of Mashiach, the one who died and lives forever. Verse 11, therefore, if perfection, Verse 9, even Levi, who received tithes, paid tithes through Abraham, so to speak. For he was still in the loins of his father when Melchizedek met him. You hear what that's saying? That even though he wasn't even born yet, he was still the seed in the loins of Abraham. And all the unborn paid tithes, even though they weren't born yet. Therefore, if perfection were through the Levitical priesthood, for under it the people received the Torah, what further need was there that another priest should rise according to the order of Melchizedek and not be called according to the order of Aaron? For the priesthood being changed, of necessity there is also a change of the Torah. There's a big difference in saying to somebody the law has been changed, or there's been a change in the law, or saying the law is done away with. The whole point of this passage is, since the priesthood was changed, we're not following a Levitical priesthood, are we? But we're following a priesthood of the Mashiach according to the order of Melchizedek, who has become our high priest for us, right? Isn't this what this is talking about? So since the priesthood was changed, now under the old priesthood, what was the duties of the priest? To handle the offerings that the people brought, and they were mediated between Yahweh and Yehoshua through Yahweh and the people through the sacrifices, right? Verse 12, for the priesthood being changed of necessity, there is also a change of the Torah. For he of whom these things are spoken belongs to another tribe from which no man has officiated at the altar or served at the altar. For it's evident that our master arose from Judah, of which tribe Moshe spoke nothing concerning priesthood. And is yet far more evident if, in the likeness of Melchizedek, there arises another priest who has come not according to the Torah of a fleshly commandment, but according to the power of an endless life. For he testifies, and now he quotes from Psalm 110, you are a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek. Verse 18, for on the one hand there is an annulling of the former commandment because of its weakness and unprofitableness. An annulling of what? The commandment, what you bring a sacrifice to cover your sin. Verse 19, for the law made nothing perfect or complete. The law made nothing complete. What did Messiah say when he hung on the execution stake? It is finished. It means it's all done. It's complete. For the law made nothing complete or perfect. On the other hand, there is the bringing in of a better hope through which we draw near to Elohim. And inasmuch as he was not made priest without an oath. For they have become priests without an oath, but he with an oath by him who said to him, Yahweh has sworn and will not relent. You are a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek. He quoted that Psalm 110 in verse 4 again, didn't he? By so much more, Yehoshua has become surety or the guarantee of a better covenant. Disposition. That number there for covenant is 1242. Diatheke. And it means a disposition of sin is what we're talking about. And there were many priests because they were prevented by death from continuing. But he, because he continues forever, has an unchangeable priesthood. I would submit to you that most people today who follow any kind of religion at all have no concept of Yehoshua as our high priest. They have no understanding of what his purpose is. The whole purpose of a high priest was to hear confession of the people, who sinned, right? And minister to them, in the sacrifices which would cover their sin. So what's the purpose of a high priest today? To hear our confession, right? And then through his own sacrifice we can be forgiven and reconciled back to the Father by what the Son did. Is that not important? Do we not need to be reconciled back to the Father today? Verse 25, therefore he is also able to save to the uttermost those who come to Elohim through him, since he ever lives to make intercession for them. Yehoshua is alive right now, is he not? And whenever we confess our sins and everything, he makes intercession for us through what he's done for us. Is that not true? Verse 26, for such a high priest was fitting for us, who is holy or set apart, harmless or innocent, undefiled, separate from sinners, and has become higher than the heavens, who does not need daily, as those high priests, to offer up sacrifices, first for his own sins and then for the people's. For this he did once for all when he offered up himself. For the Torah appoints as high priests men who have weakness, but the word of the oath, which came after the law, appoints the Son who has been perfected forever. Where was the oath? In the Psalm of David. What did Messiah in Luke 24:44 say? I have come to fulfill that which was written of him in the Torah and the Psalms and the prophets. He came to fulfill this oath that was given through David, who was a prophet. And that oath was given through David after the Torah was written. Does it abrogate the law? Does it do away with it? Or is it a fulfillment of what the law predicted would happen? The deeper we get into it, the more it just verifies everything we've learned, that the law is still for today, and it can never be changed. Go to Matthew chapter 3. In Matthew chapter 3. I want to start in verse 13. See, then Yehoshua came from Galilee to Yochanan at the Jordan, the Yarden, to be baptized by him. And Yochanan tried to prevent him, saying, I have need to be baptized or immersed by you, and are you coming to me? Remember, baptism, immersion, means to make fully wet. If we'll get the idea of baptism out of our minds that we've been given for so many years by so many different people, and think about the term baptism, it means making fully wet. He came to him to be made fully wet in the Jordan, and he says, you're coming to me, yet I need to be made fully wet by you. Now what's he talking about? He'd been in the water how many times? I mean, how many did he baptize? I mean, it's not a matter of just getting wet, okay? Verse 15, but Yehoshua answered and said to him, permit it to be so now, for thus it is fitting for us to fulfill all righteousness. Then he allowed him. What is the righteousness Messiah is fixing to be fulfilling by being immersed by John in that water? When we study the Torah, we have Aaron and his sons being immersed in the water and washed, sitting at the gate for 7 days being purified before they entered into their priesthood. Yehoshua had to be immersed before he entered into his priesthood. At what age did this occur? At the age of 30. How old did it say he was? About the age of 30. Verse 16, then Yehoshua, when he had been baptized, or made fully wet, or whelmed, came up immediately from the water, and behold, the heavens were opened to him, and he saw the Spirit of Elohim descending like a dove and alighting upon him. The Spirit, the breath. And suddenly a voice came from heaven saying, this is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Now, nobody's ever heard the voice of Yahweh, so whose voice did they hear? Yehoshua. He said it some time back, and now it's being what? Brought forth. Then Yehoshua was led up by the breath, the Spirit, into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. And when he had fasted 40 days and 40 nights, afterward he was hungry. Now when the tempter came to him, he said, if you are the Son of Elohim, command that these stones become bread. He just got through saying, this voice says, this is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased, right? So what did he tempt him with? If you're the Son of El, command these stones to become bread. Isn't that pride in who you are? But he answered and said, it's written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of Yahweh or Elohim. Messiah said, man shall live by every word that proceeds from the mouth of Elohim, the Creator. Then the devil took him up into the holy city, set him on the pinnacle of the temple, and said to him, if you are the Son of Elohim, throw yourself down, for it is written, he shall give his angels charge concerning you. Oh, now he's what? Before he was pride, now he's saying the Scriptures. If Yehoshua had done that, what would it be? Would it have been tempting Yahweh? You shall not tempt. And in their hands they shall bear you up, lest you dash your foot against a stone. Yahweh said to him, it is written again, you shall not tempt Yahweh Eloheka. Again the devil took him up on an exceedingly high mountain and showed him all the kings of the world and their glory. And he said to him, all these things I will give you if you will fall down and worship me. Then Yehoshua said to him, away with you, Hasatan, our adversary, for it is written, you shall worship Yahweh Eloheka, and him only you shall serve. Then the devil left him, and behold, angels came and ministered to him. Isn't that exactly what happened with Abraham, the king of Sodom, the son of evil, and Melchizedek? And it's the same thing. And he said, I don't want what you got. And he took what Melchizedek brought. You see the picture? Back in Genesis, that verse 19, he blessed him and said, blessed be Abram of El Elyon, possessor of heaven and earth. That word possessor is the number 7069. Koniah. It means to erect, i.e. to create, to procure, especially by purchase. It means to own. He created, He owns everything. Messiah rose from the dead. He said what? Everything under the heavens, under the sun, in the heavens, under the earth, everything had been given to him, right? And then he said, therefore I say to you. And what did he send the people out to go do? Make disciples. Make students of his word.
Not make preachers.
They're trying to make converts to their particular brand of religion. Period. Their denomination. Denominate means to what? To take from something and make it something else. If you put somebody's name in a political race, you nominate them, right? What if you take their name out? Does that denominate? Probably not, but it sounds neat. In chapter 15, he said, after these things, the word of Yahweh came to Abram in a vision. See, before he had appeared to him, and he was seen by him, it says. You remember we looked at that. And he was seen by Abram. But now it said, the word of Yahweh came to Abram in a vision, saying, do not be afraid, Abram. I am your Magen. I am your shield. Numbers 4043 there. Your exceedingly great reward. But Abram said, Adonai Yahweh, what will you give me, seeing I go childless, and the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus? The heir of his house was a man who wasn't even from him. It was from Damascus. That's Syria, isn't it? The number Eliezer is number 461. The name Eliezer means El is helper. Isn't that a neat thing? El is helper. Then Abram said, look, you have given me no offspring. Indeed, one born in my house is my heir. A servant. Man. Okay. Verse 4. Behold, the word of Yahweh came to him, saying, this one shall not be your heir, but one who will come from your own body shall be your heir. You know, the thing up there, and when Abram asked him the question, what good is it to have everything and yet not have an heir or someone to give it to? Is what he's really trying to say. Then he brought him outside and said, look now toward heaven and count the stars if you are able to number them. Count the stars. Oh, he told him his seed was going to be as the dust of the earth. Now he's saying, count the stars if you are able to number them. And he said to him, so shall your descendants be. Verse 6, and he believed in Yahweh, and he accounted it to him for righteousness. That word, and he accounted, is the number 2803. The word itself is the word kashav. Before I give you the meaning of it, I want to go to the book of James, chapter 1. And read verses 5 through 8. Book of James, or Yaakov, chapter 1, verse 5. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of Elohim, who gives to all liberally and without reproach, and it will be given to him. But let him ask in faith, or trusting, with no doubting. For he who doubts is like a wave of the sea, driven and tossed by the wind. For let not that man suppose that he will receive anything from Yahweh. He is a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. Boy, we really need to mull that one over a lot. Okay? Unstable. If you ask him for something, if you don't think you're going to get it, why ask? You know? Now go back to Genesis. He believed in Yahweh and he accounted to him for righteousness. He believed in Yahweh. To believe means you trust what was said and do what you were told to do. So believing is trusting, and it's not just an easy believism, it's actually doing what he said do. You believe what he said, so you do what he told you to do, expecting to get what he said you can have. That's Bible hope. That's an expectation that what Yahweh said is fixing to come to pass in your life because you did what he told you to do. And if he told you to do it and you did it, then you can expect him to do what he said, right? He's not going to say, oh, I was just kidding. But if you do what he said, is it wrong to have the expectation of him promising you something? But Satan would make us say, oh, you just did that to get ahead. Well, yeah. I mean, you know. But isn't that true? What we're trying to do is reach for him. To gain. Why are you going to do something and expect to get killed for it? I mean, that's, you know, that'd be dumb. 2803, Kashav. Literally the word means to braid together. You know what braid is? Like when you braid things, leather or straps, or braid things together. To interpenetrate. To become one with. He believed Yahweh, and he accounted, or he became one with the word he believed. You see the importance of that? You believe what Yahweh told you, and you do it because he said do it, and you become with that word, one with that word, and that word then has to perform in your life. His word will accomplish that which he sent it to do. You become one with that word, and whatever that word says, you will receive what it said you can have. But you have to accept it and believe it. And expect it. And you don't walk around saying, well, I guess I ain't got it yet, or whatever it is. Doesn't matter what you see. Doesn't matter what anybody else says or thinks. What matters is what his word says, and do you believe it? And do you accept that word in your life and let it become one with you, and you become one with it? In a mental sense, it means to become regarded as one with it, to be esteemed as one with it. Now in verse 7, then he said to him, I am Yahweh, who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land to inherit it. And he said, Adonai Yahweh, how shall I know that I will inherit it? So he said to him, bring me a 3-year-old heifer, a 3-year-old female goat, a 3-year-old ram, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. Those are all clean animals, by the way. Then he brought all these to him and cut them in two down the middle and placed each piece opposite the other, but he did not cut the birds in two. And when the vultures came down the carcasses, Abram drove them away. You know, they were long enough down there, you know, he did this, they were laying there long enough to draw carrion to come in, and he began to drive them off. Now when the sun was going down, that means kind of like at the end of the day before the beginning of the new day, a deep sleep fell upon Abram, and behold, horror and great darkness fell upon him. This horror and great darkness, in his sleep, Yahweh showed him some things to come in the future. And what he saw in the future was a great horror to him. Then he said to Abram, in our English Bible it says, no, certainly. In the Hebrew text it is the word yada, yadaim, 3045, 3045. It's the same word, yada, twice, which means to ascertain as by a word of knowledge from Yahweh, to know by seeing, to understand. It's the same thing that when Yaakov adopted and he switched his hands, and Joseph got unhappy and he said, I know, yada, yada, is what he's saying. Then he said to Abram, no, 3045, that your descendants will be strangers in a land that's not theirs, and will serve them, and they will afflict them 400 years. He's saying that they're going to be in this afflicted bondage for 400 years. That's a horror. Abram said, you promised me that I'll have descendants, the dust of heaven, the stars of the heaven. And now he sees that they're going to be there. There's going to be a lot of them, but they're going to be in bondage and afflicted for 400 years. Not to make a man think, why would I bring all these people into this, to be afflicted for 400 years? Why? Would that be a horror? Nobody gives birth to children and want to know that they're going to be afflicted or hurt or beat or anything else. Nobody wants that. I mean, that wasn't the purpose of it. Of course, sometimes you didn't have any purpose, but, But that wasn't, that's not what you choose to do. Verse 14, and also the nation whom they serve I will judge. After they shall come out with great possessions. He hadn't even had a son yet. Now he's promising beforehand, isn't he? Now as for you, you shall go to your fathers in peace. You shall be buried at a good old age. But in the 4th generation they shall return here, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. Their sins have to be filled up. And at the appointed time, he will send them someone, what? To relieve them of that. To remove them. That's what he's going to do with Barbara and send them in there. Before we go on, go to Acts chapter 7. Now this is Stephen. Everybody talks about Stephen in his monologue or what he was, speaking there before the people. But in verse 5, Stephen is speaking. He says, and Elohim gave him no inheritance in it, referring to Abraham, not even to set his foot on. But even when Abraham had no child, he promised to give it to him for a possession and to his descendants after him. Stephen recognized this whole promise through Abram, and yet all we ever have is this reference here in the book of Acts to it, because everybody else will tell us you don't have to go back and read any of that stuff. It doesn't matter. And yet this whole thing is dependent upon the promise that he made to Abraham. Verse 6, but Elohim spoke in this way, that his descendants would sojourn in a foreign land, and that they would bring them into bondage and oppress them 400 years. There are scholars today saying that just 400 years is really wrong. Isn't it a shame? It says it over here in the Torah, and it says it in the commentary as well. And yet them scholars say none of them know what they're talking about. Verse 7, and the nation to whom they will be in bondage, I will judge. Now the children were in bondage in Egypt, right? And the word Egypt comes from Mitzrayim, dire straits or bondage, right? Which is a picture of the world. Where are all of the descendants of Abraham today? In the world. He said, I will judge, said Elohim, and after that they shall come out and serve me in this place. Mount Horeb is what he's talking about. Go to Exodus 12. In verses 40 and 41. And I'm sorry, I don't really know how to teach anything other than just this, what the Word says. If I was to try to teach something different, I would have to make a statement like, well, I know that that's what this Word says, but that's not true. Now, I can't imagine me, bringing that to somebody else. I might say to you, I know this is what the English says, but in the Hebrew it says something differently. And I can show you where the text, differs from translations into what the text really says. But here in verse 40 and 41, now the sojourn of the sons of Israel who lived in Egypt was 430 years. And it came to pass at the end of the 430 years, on the very same day. That's kind of like saying on the same day they went in, they fixed to come out. 430 years later. Now, he said they were going to be in bondage for 400 years, right? But they were there for 430. So what happened to them other 30 years? When they went down, were they in bondage, or were they were kept by the state? Put them up there in that land, fed them, gave them whatever they needed. Joseph was viceroy in Egypt, right? And he took care of them. But after he died, there was another one, the Pharaoh that came up that didn't know him or anything about him. And then the bondage began, right? Okay. Go back to Genesis. Again in verse 16, but in the fourth generation they shall return here, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. And it came to pass when the sun went down.
What verse are we in?
Verse 17. When the sun went down, it was dark. Behold, it was a smoking oven and a burning torch that passed between those pieces. I didn't have the numbers here of the words, and I can't give you the words here, but in the Hebrew, the actual wording of the Hebrew refers to like a flaming torch passed between the pieces. What they saw was like a flaming torch. Who did Moses see in the bush? A flame. The bush burning on the flame, right? When the word came down on Mount Horeb, did it not come down in pillars of smoke and flames of fire and the sound of the shofar? When the word came into them on the day of Pentecost in Acts chapter 2, did not it set on each one of them as flames of fire on each one? So here he says, behold, there was a smoking oven and a burning torch. Those are not really bad ways to describe what the Hebrew talks about as far as being a flame of fire, that boiled upon itself, and passed through these pieces. What was it doing? It passed between those pieces. What was between those pieces on the ground? There's the blood of those animals. What walked in that blood then? It was the word as a flaming fire. Why did he put Abram to sleep? Normally when two people enter into a covenant, right? Both parties, when they kill the animal and the blood spills, and both parties walk in that blood, and it becomes a covenant of blood between the two parties. One, take care of the other. What could Abraham do to fulfill the promise that Yahweh made him? What can he do? What man can fulfill the word of Yahweh? All you can do is obey what he tells you to do, right? So Yahweh put Abram to sleep, and he walked in. Well, Yahweh is a spirit, right? And he gives us this description then of a flaming fire that walked in this blood to confirm the word of the oath, the promise to Abraham in the blood that he walked in. And it's a picture of him himself, who would come in his own blood to confirm the covenant that he gave to Abraham. When Yehoshua came and died on the execution stake, was he confirming the covenant that he gave to Abraham? And this is a picture of it. What I'm trying to say is people talk about all that old stuff and done away with. No, what Messiah came to do is exactly what this said he was going to do, is to confirm the promise that he's given to Abraham at this time. Is that not a much closer understanding? On the same day, Yahweh made a covenant with Abram, saying, to your descendants I have given this land from the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates. I have given. That's like it's already done. The Kenites, the Kenizzites, the Kadmonites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Rephaim, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Girgashites, and the Jebusites. Where are all them people today? Gone. They were removed when their sins were fulfilled. In chapter 16, now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no sons, and she had an Egyptian maidservant whose name was Hagar. So Sarai said to Abram, see now, Yahweh has restrained me from bearing children. Well, now Yahweh, not letting me have any children, so evidently he wants me to give her to you so you can have one with her. We would never take it upon ourselves to think like that, would we? Well, not too many times in the same day. Please go into my maid, perhaps I shall obtain children by her. And Abram heeded the voice of Sarai. This is trying to fulfill Yahweh's word in the flesh, right? You can't fulfill his word. You let him fulfill his word. Then Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar, her maid, the Egyptian, and gave her to her husband Abram to be his wife, after Abram had dwelt 10 years in the land of Canaan. And how old were they when he went down there? He was 75. Went down there at 85. So he went into Hagar, and she conceived, and when she saw that she had conceived, her mistress became despised in her eyes. You see, her maid is now looking at her female boss and saying, I'm better than you because I did something you couldn't do. That's what's happened. Then Sarai said to Abram, my wrong be upon you. I gave my maid into your embrace, and when she saw that she had conceived, I became despised in her eyes. Yahweh judge between you and me. Abram could have said no. We'll let Yahweh do it. But he didn't. So Abram said to Sarai, indeed, your maid is in your hand. Do to her as you please. And when Sarai dealt harshly with her, she fled from her presence. Now the angel or the messenger of Yahweh. I wonder who that is. The angel of Yahweh found her by a spring of water in the wilderness, by the spring on the way to Shur. And he said, Hagar, Sarai's maid, where have you come from and where are you going? And she said, I am fleeing from the presence of my mistress Sarai. So the messenger of Yahweh said to her, return to your mistress and submit yourself under her hand. Then the angel or the messenger of Yahweh said to her, I will multiply your descendants exceedingly, so that they shall not be counted for multitude. And the angel of Yahweh said to her, behold, you are with child, and you shall bear a son. You shall call his name Ishmael, because Yahweh has heard your affliction. Literally, Ishmael means El hears, or Yahweh hears. Verse 12, he shall be a wild man. The word wild, there's the number 6501. Res, or pere. It's like, are you going to be a wild donkey? Or actually, I think the King James says a wild ass of a man.
So is little.
And all his descendants have been like that ever since. Islam, Muslim faith, all follow the same Bible that the Christians do, and everybody else does, until they get down to this part. And this is where they begin to say, well, the Jews changed all the scripture now because Ishmael was really the son of his wife and the other was the son of the maidservant. Isn't it funny that when Yahweh, who did all this, became a man and came to earth, didn't tell us that the Jews messed up the scriptures? He didn't tell us that, did he? He shall be a wild man, his hand shall be against every man, and every man's hand against him, and he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren. Where are they? Israel is surrounded by Islamic nations, are they not? Verse 13, then she called the name of Yahweh who spoke to her. She said, you are El Roy. I bet people didn't realize El Roy was a name for Yahweh, did they? El Roy, who sees, for she said, have I also here seen him who sees me? El Roy is the one who sees me. Therefore the well was called Be'er Laharoi, the well of the one who lives and sees me. Observe, it is between Kadesh and Bered. So Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram named his son whom Hagar bore Ishmael. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore Ishmael to Abram. 86. Chapter 17 verse 1 says, when Abram was 99 years old. We just jumped another 13 years, didn't we? Y'all ever notice how fast time goes by in the scriptures? When Abram was 99 years old, Yahweh appeared to Abram and said to him, Ani El Shaddai, walk before me and be blameless. This is the appointed time. It is now the time for everything to come to be. Verse 2, and I will make my covenant between me and you and will multiply you exceedingly. Then Abram fell on his face, and Elohim talked with him, saying, now how long has it been since Yahweh promised him a son or an heir? Been a while, hasn't it? Did he give up? Granted, they tried in the flesh to make it happen, but we all know, what he's fixing to tell him on that. But think, this is 13 years later. This boy Ishmael is growing all this time, and we haven't had any kind of connection here or any kind of word that said that Abraham and Yahweh had any kind of talking going on. He might have thought, oh, well, this boy's the one going to grow up and be my heir. He's had, 13 years to think about it. He's had 13 years to get attached to this boy. Verse 3, then Abram fell on his face, and Elohim talked with him, saying, as for me, behold, my covenant is with you, and you shall be father of many nations. What does the name Abraham mean? Father of many nations. No longer shall your name be called Abram, but your name shall be Abraham, for I have made you a father of many nations. I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will make nations of you, and kings shall come from you. Verse 7, and I will establish my covenant between me and you and your descendants after you in their generations for an everlasting covenant. Yahweh is going to take flesh upon himself, come to the earth, and in his own blood, his word will walk in the fire of his own blood to establish the covenant with us that he promised to Abraham. That's what all that symbolism is. To you and your descendants after you. Before we go on to verse 8, we talked about giving the land as a possession also. Go to Galatians chapter 3. In verse 29. This is why I'm getting people say, well, have you read Galatians? Well, my question is, yeah, have you read Galatians? Next time somebody said to you something about, have you read Galatians? Say, well, yeah, but have you read Genesis, which is the foundation for Galatians? Without the foundation, no wonder they can't see the house. Verse 29. Galatians chapter 3. And if you are the Mashiachs, then you are Abraham's seed, or Abram's seed, and heirs according to the promise. Now, if the one says seed, talking about Messiah Yahushua, he's not saying that you are Messiah Yahushua, but just said you are still the descendant of Abraham and heirs according to promise. What promise? Did we just read a promise? Over here in Genesis 17:7, I will establish my covenant between me and you and your descendants after you and their generations for an everlasting covenant. Is that the promise Yahweh gave to Abraham? Who is responsible then for fulfilling that promise? Yahweh is. That's why he didn't let Abram walk in the blood. Why he walked in the blood himself. Because the blood is a picture of what he's going to do. And if you belong to to Abraham, then you are heirs of the promise. The promise is that he promised Abraham, I'm going to give you a covenant. So then we accept Messiah Yahushua. Then what belongs to us? The covenant that he promised through Moshe. That's what belongs to us. If you walk in my law, he said, I'll do all these things for you. Verse 8, back in Genesis 17. Also I give to you and your descendants after you the land in which you are a stranger, all the land of Canaan as an everlasting possession. I will be their Elohim. Is anybody trying to give that land away today? It's evidently then that they don't believe the Torah or the Old Testament, which says the land is not theirs to give. It's Yahweh's land. The place where he chose to put his name. And who controls that place right now? Muslims up on the Temple Mount. Do you think Yahweh's happy about that? No, I don't think so. I think one of these days you're going to see all that go away. Verse 9, and Elohim said to Abraham, as for you, you shall keep my covenant, you and your descendants after you, throughout their generations. When did that end? When there ain't no more generations of people descended from Abraham? When is that over? Is it evident that people are saying all that old stuff is done away with, don't have any idea what they're talking about? Verse 10, this is my covenant, which you shall keep between me and you and your descendants after you. Every male child among you shall be circumcised. Is this the covenant? No. And you shall be circumcised in the flesh of your foreskins, and it shall be a sign, an oath, 226 is the number there, of the covenant between me and you. Verse 12, he who is 8 days old among you shall be circumcised, every male. The word child is not in the text. Every male in your generations. He who is born in your house or bought with money from any stranger who is not your descendant. He who is born in your house and he who is bought with your money must be circumcised, and my covenant shall be in your flesh for an everlasting covenant. It's a sign of the covenant. Okay? It's a symbol. You remove the fleshly covering is a symbol of accepting the covering from Yahweh. It's the same thing as when Adam and Eve ate and they knew that they were naked. They knew they had no covering. Or they knew that they had lost the covering that Yahweh had provided for them. And then they went out trying to establish their own covering and got fig leaves and sewed them together. Everybody trying to find a way to cover their nakedness. Do you think that you're hid from Yahweh? I don't care how many clothes we put on. He sees everything. He knows what we do or don't do or should or shouldn't. Verse 14, and the uncircumcised male who is not circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin, that person shall be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant. Is that saying that a man who does not circumcise his child is causing that child to be separated from the covenant forever? When that child gets to be old enough, he could go through and have it done, couldn't he? Verse 15, after all, how old was Abraham when he was circumcised? He was a little older than 8 days, wasn't he? Then Elohim said to Abraham, as for Sarai, your wife, you shall not call her name Sarai, but Sarah shall be her name. I'm thinking about this covenant, this sign of circumcision. Circumcision is a sign of acceptance of the covenant, the same as a rainbow is a sign or token of the covenant that he made with all flesh. Something that exists for all time. If you stop to think about how many people in our society have tried to eliminate circumcision as an act of any kind. Then first they put it in the hospital and said, well, you know, the doctors have to do it. You can't, you know, the mohel. A mohel, who is a man trained in circumcision, is a Hebrew man. He's probably got more knowledge of circumcision than any doctor that ever walked, as far as knowing what they're doing. But how many people who try to say, oh, that's child abuse, or they've turned something that Yahweh said and tried to make it into something evil, and it's not. The sign of circumcision has been the object of many enemies of Yahweh. Many have attempted to erase the rite of circumcision from all time. The Maccabeans defended it. Judas Maccabee and all those, when we go back to the beginning of the Feast of Hanukkah and so forth. Antiochus IV, when he became, you know, leader and took over Israel and everything, he killed the mothers and the children if they practiced circumcision of the male children. Hung the child around the mother's neck until the child decomposed. This is written in the laws. Again, circumcision was banned by Hadrian in the days of the Roman Empire. It is still regarded, though, as the symbol of the covenant Yahweh made with Abraham. I don't care what people think. It's still the symbol of the covenant, still the sign. The word Sarah, 8283. Remember, Sarai meant princess, in the feminine sense. Sarah, 8283, means noble woman. Noble woman. The name Yisrael, somebody called Jacob or Yaakov, was changed to Yisrael. The name Yisrael is 3478. Yisrael means prince with El. Yisrael. Sra. Sarah is in the middle of that name. Noble woman, she became, you know, prince with El. And Sarah is the feminine of Sar. Who is Sar Shalom, Prince of Peace, Yehoshua? And the word Sar is 8269, which means prince. Yisrael comes from the number 8280. The word Sarah, which means to prevail or to have power as a prince. Isn't it funny? Abram was his friend. Sarah, his wife, who gave birth to the figure of the covenant, in her name is included in Yisrael, that became the name of the people of Yahweh. If Yehoshua then is the true Prince of Peace, Prince with El, Yisrael, then if we are the children of Yisrael, then we have in effect then his name on us as the children of Yisrael, the Prince of Peace. I think it's kind of an interesting thought when you take all them words back to where they came from. Verse 16, and I will bless her, and also give you a son by her. What?
I have blessed is what we were told it was. I have blessed, past tense.
Okay, and I will bless or have blessed and also give you a son by her. She's saying the tense is already done, past tense. I will bless and have blessed, and she shall be the mother of nations. Kings of people shall be from her. Again, that word nations is goyim. The fullness of the Gentiles would be the fullness of the goyim. There are people out there who would say that the church was always meant to replace the children of Israel. I would say to them and to anybody else, the house of Israel, through Ephraim, scattered among all the nations of the world, was always Yahweh's plan in order to be able to bring everybody in the world to himself through the children of Israel. Verse 17, then Abraham fell on his face and laughed and said in his heart, shall a child or shall one be born to a man who is 100 years old, and shall Sarah who is 90 years old bear? You know, the word laughter is the name Yitzhak. And Abraham said to Elohim, oh, that Ishmael might live or have life before you. Oh, here it comes. He prayed for Ishmael. Then Elohim said, no, Sarah, your wife, shall bear you a son, and you shall call his name Yitzhak. I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and with his descendants after him. The covenant, which includes the promise of the land, belongs to who? Yitzhak and all his descendants. In verse 20, and as for Ishmael, I have heard you. Behold, I have blessed him, and will make him fruitful, and will multiply him exceedingly. He shall beget 12 princes, and I will make him a great nation. He gave what? We'll see the genealogy later on, all the ones that he had and the tribes that were there. But my covenant I will establish with Yitzhak, whom Sarah shall bear to you at this set time next year, at the appointed time next year. Then he finished talking with him, and Elohim went up from Abraham. So Abraham took Ishmael his son, all who were born in his house, and all who were bought with his money, every male among the men of Abraham's house, and circumcised the flesh of their foreskins that very same day, as Elohim had said to him. I don't know whether people think about it or not, but that took some guts. That took some intestinal fortitude to go through. He's 99 years old. Ishmael was circumcised in the covenant of Yahweh at the age of 13. Anybody ever thought about that? We were having dinner in a place the other day, and there was a young man waiting on us at the table, and he didn't look like he was from Fort Worth, but we asked him where he was from. His name was Shadi. We asked him where he was from. He said he was born in Syria. Been living here for about the last, 14, 15 or 12 years, something like that. But we had refused something on the menu because we didn't have pork, and he said, can I ask you why you don't eat pork? And he said, I figure you must be either Christians or Jewish or something, because,
No, he said, are you Jewish?
Are you Jewish? But anyway, we were talking, and he said one of the things about not eating, and they don't eat pork either. But he said, actually, it's very, very simple. We don't eat anything that eats meat.
Meat.
What they eat is things that eat the other stuff. They don't eat anything that eats meat. Stop and think about it. That's a very simple thought. Anyway.
Very nice young man.
Verse 24. Abraham was 99 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. And Ishmael, his son, was 13 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. That very same day Abraham was circumcised, and his son Ishmael. And all the men of his house, born in the house or bought with money from a stranger, were circumcised with him. The half Torah today, go with me to Isaiah chapter 40. This passage, the reason why this was chosen as a concluding reading today for the Torah portion is actually a comparison between the faith of Abram and the faith of his descendants in an area that they're about ready to give up everything. And that's the reason. You know, sometimes these passages are shown to show a comparison, and sometimes they're shown to show the same thing. Here in Isaiah 40, starting in verse 27, he says, "Why do you say, O Yaakov, and speak, O Israel, that my way is hidden from Yahweh, and my just claim is passed over by my Elohim?" They were complaining that Yahweh doesn't see, Yahweh doesn't care, He doesn't hear, He doesn't do this, He doesn't do nothing. Verse 20 said, "Have you not known, have you not heard, the everlasting El, Yahweh, the Creator of the ends of the earth, neither faints nor is weary." There's no searching of His understanding. He gives power to the weak, and to those who have no might He increases strength. Even the youth shall faint and be weary, and the young men shall utterly fall. But those who wait on Yahweh shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. In the Pentateuch, in this passage of Scriptures, in Isaiah, if you have one, it's on page 61. Remember, when I say the Pentateuch, I'm talking about people that don't accept Messiah Yehoshua as the son, the true Messiah. But he said, in this they that wait on Yahweh is what it's talking about. Under a wave of enthusiasm, we are all capable of an isolated act of heroism. Any of us at any given point in time can do something really marvelous. We can soar or run for a time. It's far harder to follow the monotonous round of everyday duty when the vision has faded and the splendor seems gone, undeterred by trials and hindrances, meeting them in the spirit of faith and conquering them by steadfastness. Think about that. Anybody can do great things every now and then, but to hang in there and just continue to do what you know you're supposed to do when it seems like, boy, this is a waste of, you just keep doing it because you're supposed to. This is the achievement of those who wait for Yahweh. Day by day, they shall renew their strength. Day by day, you keep doing what Yahweh says do. Day by day, you are getting stronger. Day by day. Give us this day our daily bread. Day by day. I think that's an interesting thought. When we seem like things are so far, but right at that point, you might be as close as you've ever been to receiving that thing that the Yahweh said you can have. In chapter 41 now, "Keep silence before me, coastlands, and let the people renew their strength. Let them come near, then let them speak. Let us come together for judgment. Who raised up one from the east? Who in righteousness called him to his feet? Who gave the nation before him and made him rule over kings? Who gave them as the dust to his sword, as driven stubble to his bow? Who pursued them and passed safely by the way that he had not gone with his feet? Who has performed and done it, calling the generations from the beginning? Ani, Yahweh, I am the first and the last. Ani, I am He." Who's done all these things? Yahweh has. Called a generation. Do you realize that everything exists because Yahweh called it into being? Why is it so important to study His Word and know what He promised in His Word? Because He promises in His Word everything that's going to come to pass from the beginning to the end. And when you see it happening, you know His Word is true, and that way He has to be who He says He is. That's the proof of whether it's true or not. The coastland saw and feared. The ends of the earth were afraid. They drew near and came. Everyone helped his brother and said to everyone helped his neighbor and said to his brother, "Be of good courage." So the craftsman encouraged the goldsmith. He who smooths with the hammer inspired him who strikes the anvil, saying, "It is ready for the soldering." Then he fastened it with pegs that it might not totter. But you, Israel, are my servant, Yaakov, whom I have chosen, the descendants of Abraham, my friend. The descendants of Abraham, my friend. You whom I have taken from the ends of the earth. If we consider ourselves part of the house of Israel, is this speaking to us today? You whom I have taken from the ends of the earth and called from its farthest regions and said to you, "You are my servant. I have chosen you and have not cast you away. Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your Elohim. I will strengthen you. Yes, I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. Behold, all those who were incensed against you shall be ashamed and disgraced. They shall be as nothing. Those who strive with you shall perish. You shall seek them and not find them. Those who contended with you, those who war against you, shall be as nothing, as a non-existent thing. That's quite a promise. For I, Yahweh Eloheka, will hold your right hand, saying to you, "Fear not, I will help you." Is He wanting to be close to us? Is He wanting us to think of Him as holding our hand in His hand? Fear not, you worm Yaakov. You men of Israel, I will help you, says Yahweh, and your Redeemer, the Holy One of Israel. Behold, I will make you into a new threshing sledge with sharp teeth. You shall thresh the mountains and beat them small and make the hills like chaff. You shall winnow them, the wind shall carry them away. The whirlwind shall scatter them. You shall rejoice in Yahweh, glory in the Holy One of Israel. Go to 1 John chapter 5. Verses 4 and 5. For whatever is born of El overcomes the world. And this is the victory that has overcome the world, our faith. Who is he who overcomes the world but he who believes that Yehoshua is the Son of Elohim, the Son of the Creator? That's kind of a strange thing to say. That word born there in verse 4 is the number 1080. "1080 has two meanings. Literally to procreate, figuratively to regenerate. The Messiah said you must be born again. He didn't say you crawl back in the room, be born again, back in the womb. But he's saying that you must be regenerated, for whatever is regenerated of Elohim overcomes the world. And this is the victory that has overcome the world, our faith, our trust. Who is he who overcomes the world but he who believes? 4100 is the number for that word believes. It means to entrust. He who believes or entrusts that Yehoshua is the Son of Elohim. Word son is the number 5207. Used of immediate, remote, or figurative kinship. Can also mean a pupil or student or a disciple. Who is he who overcomes the world but he who believes that Yehoshua is the son or disciple or the student of Yahweh? And if we believe that he is, he learned obedience through what he suffered, and what the scripture says, then we believe in him, then we try to be like him and walk in obedience the same way he did, and we become a pupil or student just like he was. He learned obedience, didn't it say that? Must we learn obedience? Without obedience, what is there?
Sin.
Now, if you don't want to obey anything, you just throw it all out, say it's done away with, you don't have to do nothing, right? Isn't that what's happened? Isn't that where the world is today? The deeper you get into the Word, the closer you get to understanding the obedience that's required, the smaller the numbers get of people who say, I'm going to walk in obedience to this Word. The larger the number of people who would say, well, now that's really not the truth I wanted to hear. Very few. It's going to be a remnant. You know, that's what it says in the book of Hebrews. When he come back, will he find faith on the earth? Will he find trusting people on the earth, trusting his word? He said, many are going to say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, we did this, we did that. He's going to say, depart from me, I never knew you. You who practice lawlessness. What does that mean? You who transgress the Torah. Is he saying that those others who disobey the Torah are not going to be with me, are not going to have any part in my kingdom? Isn't that what he's saying? Is it important to be obedient to the Torah? Is it important? Without obedience, what else is there? I thank you for your time and your patience, and that concludes the readings for this day.